And here we are, getting right back down to business. This is Angular 2 crash course presented by Everything JS Meetup Group. And what we have over here is the very next section. This is part 2 of the crash course. And now we've pretty much laid down the foundations in the previous video of part 1 of what is a component. And the entire Angular 2 application is always composed of components that have app logic associated with it, and it's also got HTML associated with it. The TypeScript files are going to be the blueprint, and every time that the user is interacting with our app and stumbles upon specific HTML pages, new components are going to get instantiated onto the page for the user to enjoy and benefit from. So that's from the Ionic blog so that's a pretty good resource for us, and it's a great stepping stone to understanding our .ts files. It's our TypeScript files. All our components are written in TypeScript. If you know JavaScript, you're all good, and everything is jiggy baby. So what we're looking at over here is the search component. If you recall that the search component was one of the most important components of the application, I can remind you exactly what the search component was. Let me show you first how we launch the application, right? We go into cd into that folder, right? This one is called an Angular 2 crash course. We're going to press npm start, that's this language, and it's going to automatically send it to the page for us. And that's a nice little feature. While we're waiting for that, there it is, Angular 2 Quick Start. I'm the user. I'm logging into the website. I have a lot of things happening, that's why it's going really slow now. But it's usually super fast, Angular 2. What just happened is I told my application, here I am, I'm a user located in the home page, fetch me the necessary components. The application said, well, he needs 2 components on the home page. He's going to need the navbar and he's going to need the search component. This is the search component over here. ACDC, I type in there, and it's going to automatically fetch me back some data. As you can see, it gives me a result for ACDC, and when I click on ACDC, I'm going to be able to see all of their albums. So let's talk about what happened over there. The moment that I typed in AC, I got something like 15 responses, all from Spotify. How did that happen? That's what we're going to talk about now. So what essentially happened is that we have over here a TypeScript file. This is the search component. This is where everything happens. All right, and we have JavaScript in here. What we have is a class, just like we said. We have a blueprint here. Every single time that this search component is created, it's essentially like sending this type of JavaScript object onto the screen. It's got a search string. It's got a search res variable. It's got a constructor. This line over here is injecting the Spotify service, or at least a reference to it, into the component. And that way, when we write this.Spotify service, we're saying, replace the word this with search component, and it'll all start to make sense for you. Search component.Spotify service. So I want you to hone in to the property of the search component called Spotify service. Within the Spotify service is going to be a search music function. When you get to that search music function, I want you to throw in this parameter. I want you to throw in search component.searchString. You know what that is? That's the word ACDC. It's search component.searchString. It says anything that the user types in, that's the two-way binding happening right there. Anything that the user types in, send it as a search string, and we'll have a look at exactly what the service is doing with it. Let's have a quick look at it. Spotify.service.ts. It's a search music. What it does is it says it's making a GET request. http.get this.search URL. We're making a GET request to Spotify, and we're saying to them, hey Spotify, look through your database for an artist called AC, and see if there's anything similar to that. And Spotify says, yeah, no problemo muchacho, I'll send it right back to you. It does it through the .map operator. We're going to talk about that really soon. We're also going to talk about this line over here, .subscribe. And that's coming up right now. This is the .subscribe and .map is using something called RxJS that I mentioned in the previous video. That's called Reactive Extensions for JavaScript. It's endorsed by the Google team. I'll even show you really shortly what the Google team says about RxJS, but that's coming up really soon. First, we're going to touch upon the HTML of the search component, and we just want to raise a couple of questions about how everything is running here. Here's what it looks like on the HTML side of things. So if you recall that every single one of our components has these files, a TS file and an HTML file that it's joined to at the hip, and anything that happens over here, search string is anything that the user inputs. It's got this ng model with a funny syntax. That's two-way binding. It's sending ACDC back to the component, the .ts file, the app logic, and it's saying do something with it. And finally, anytime that the key up, every time that a user presses a key and then lets go, the search music function happens. And that was the TypeScript file. Meanwhile, we have over here an ngIf, just like a classic if statement in JavaScript. When there is a search res variable, then I want you to do this for loop. Let res of search res. Take the results that's sent back. Search res is where everything is saved. The data that's sent back from Spotify all gets saved in a search res array. And that's all looped through and is sent to the page with the artist name and the genre and the router link. And also we can, just like you saw, we can click the word ACDC and it'll take us to this following page, artist slash the ID. All right, so that's a little bit about that. And now we can get straight into what RxJS is. RxJS, this is straight from the Angular 2 docs, so we know that it's authoritative and we know that it's good form in terms of study to kind of follow along what the guys at Angular 2 are saying, what we should be focusing on. So they write like this: RxJS is a third-party library endorsed by Angular. All of the developer guide samples have installed the RxJS npm package because observables are used widely in Angular applications. So we hear over here that straight from the guys at Google that RxJS is being widely used in all the demos that are used in the Angular 2 docs. They're using RxJS. That's why I created a couple of slides to get us familiar with what is RxJS and get us familiar with the basic concepts of it. It's not rocket science. Let's go back to Malcolm Gladwell and Mr. Miyagi. It's a matter of time. It's a matter of fundamentals, and that's really what we want to do in this presentation. And it said this app needs it when working with the HTTP client. Actually, the Angular 2 team is talking about their own demo, but it's totally relevant and totally applicable for the Spotify app, because the Spotify app is using HTTP with Angular 2, and anytime that you're doing that, you're going to need RxJS. So they're all going together like lamb, tuna fish, and peanut butter. All right, so I mean, well, think to yourself a more harmonious mix. You know what it is? It's kind of like cereal, milk, and bananas. A wonderful mix. All right, for the Western crowd amongst the audience. Fine. And let's talk about the fundamental concepts here. We have RxJS is all about playing with data streams. What's a data streams? Can be created from many things. They can be created from UI events, HTTP requests, file systems, and array-like objects. We're not going to cover file systems, but we're going to cover 3 of these events of how exactly data streams are created. And meanwhile, we have this other term called observables, which kind of goes hand in hand with this whole concept. And observables are used to watch these streams and emit functions when a value, error, or completed signal is returned. Observables can be subscribed to by an observer. So that's already fantastic for us. We're going back to the Angular 2 app because you remember that we used that word subscribe in our search component right there. We ran this function with our search term ACDC and through our Spotify service, and we had the .subscribe. What the heck is .subscribe? This is the beginning of it. We're gonna see .subscribe in action within our developers console. I'm gonna give you some code to paste in there. Finally, observables will constantly watch streams and will update accordingly. And finally, we can interact with data streams as any regular array. Let's have a look at what it looks like. It says here the stream is created out of an array and loop through via the subscribe function. So what we do over here, we have two dependencies, jQuery and RxJS. We have an array of numbers, 5 numbers, and what we did right here on this line is that we transformed this average all array into something called an observable. We saved it in a new variable called numbers money sign, and we did rx.observable.from numbers. So we take this numbers array, ping, we throw it into the observable, and we say transform it into an observable. The moment that it becomes an observable, we do observable.subscribe. So we subscribe to this observable. Okay? What we do is imagine that v is I, and we loop through the array, and we said console log each of these elements. If there's an error, let me know about it, and when it's completed, also let me know. Right? The moment that the body has been disposed of and thrown into the river, just let me know as well. And that's exactly what's happening here. This is example number 1, because we said that data streams can be created out of array-like objects. That's gonna be helpful for us. Let's talk about example number 2 of how data streams can be created out of UI events, and that's exactly what we're looking at over here with this code. I need to fetch this code. For some reason you can't paste it from here, but that's okay because you can paste it at the very bottom. You'll see the text down here. Let's see. Bam. Cloudflare? Yeah, RxJS. Okay, here we are. Okay, we've got this. That's good. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a new index.html file on our home page, and then we're going to open up. One second. So make sure to grab that from the description over there. Paste it into your editor, because I want to show you something cool. Okay, and I want to do file, save as, save on my desktop as RxJS index dot html. Bam, bada bing, bada boom. It's been saved on the desktop. So let's once you save it in your desktop, RxJS index, you're gonna open it with Google Chrome. This is in terms of the dependencies, because it's important for us to have the dependencies. And I also want to open up this other file here, because there's a really great tutorial for understanding .subscribe and .map, two really important operators if you're working with RxJS, which is, like we said, Google said that it's good for us, so we just have to follow along like blind sheep. Okay, so we're gonna go here, right, into our we're gonna go into this blog post that I linked to in the presentation, and you'll see over here that there's some really they are the ones that gave me this input box with an ID of demo, and they said we create an observable that emits every time that a value of our input changes. So what happens is that we write just setting it up here. Okay, now we're good to go. Okay, so we say let demo input equal document.query selector demo with an ID of demo. So this input box is an ID of demo, and we turn it into a variable called demo input, and we want to transform this whole input into an observable, just like we did with that array, if you recall. And we say let OBS equal that observable, and the observable is saved in this variable, and we say obs.subscribe. Again, it's the exact same concept. We're subscribing to an observable, and already at this point here's what happens. I type in ACDC, here's what happens. I get 4 events registered. This is an example of data streams created out of events. Um, okay, we have over here event. We have event dot dot dot, and it's got all these properties associated with it. It's just like, imagine to yourself an email newsletter. People subscribe to the email newsletter, and it's got subscribers. Anytime that an update happens, all the subscribers get updated, get notified, and that's what it's all about. That's the dot subscribe method. And let's have a look back at our code to see how it ties in with our app. We say over here, it's actually an alternative. It's pretty much become the replacement for dot promise. Instead of saying instead of using promise, we use dot subscribe, and we say when the HTTP response comes back, here's what I want you to do. So it's listening over here. The HTTP data, the data that comes back from Spotify has become it's become a data stream. It's become an observable, and we're subscribing to that data, and we're saying the moment you fetched your results, send it back to me, and I'm going to do some stuff with it. We're going to talk about this fat arrow over here really shortly as well. It's coming from the latest version of JavaScript. So that's a little bit about the subscribe, and now I also want to tell you about the dot map, because the dot map is also important, because you'll notice in our service here we use something called the dot map, and that's important as well. Let's see what dot map does. It's another operator which is part of RxJS, and let me show you. So what we have over here is this dot map eTarget. All we did is add this one little line over here, dot map. So let's count. We're going to send it out. I'm just taking this line over here. We still have the demo input, right? That's being saved as this variable. But here's what happened. I just added this small line over here called dot map e fat arrow e dot target dot value. How does that change things? Let's have a look. Demo input has already been declared at anonymous. Okay, so let's reload the page. Copy it all, reload it, send it on in there. Let's see what happens now when we type ACDC. Uh-oh, spaghetti-o, look what happened there. Bam. All of a sudden, we start seeing more things. So, dot map is kind of taking the dot subscribe to a whole new level. Instead of just getting an event, we're getting some stuff back. And let's see, the actual definition is what I wrote over here. The map operator lets us project the payload of the observable into something else. And yeah, so just focus on that specific line, projecting the payload. That's what dot map does. You can look more carefully at that blog post, but we've covered dot subscribe, we've covered dot map. Those are the two most important operators within this app, and they're going to be good for you. So feel free to browse that blog article that I linked to over here in the tutorial, and that's also going to help you out. Meditate upon it as much as you please. Okay, and finally we say here, all's well and good, but what's with the fat arrows all over the place? So these fat arrows over here are actually part of the newest version of JavaScript. By using arrow function, we avoid having to type the function keyword, return keyword, and the curly brackets. And you can read more about the arrow functions. They're one of the most popular features, apparently, of the newest version of JavaScript. And you can read more about what those are and how they work and the syntax of it. But because there was these arrow functions all over the place, I wanted to give you a proper definition of what these arrow functions would do. And again, the 10,000 hour rule, wax on, wax off. The more you practice with these arrow functions, the clearer it's going to become for you. And finally, we're just about to finish. Yes, we only have 2 more slides left within part 2. So if you're still with me, that's really good. I just wanted to sum things up for you over here. And we're just about to sum up the Spotify app of Douglas Traversy. And what I wrote here is, notice that our search component saves the response in a variable called searchres. Go back to your search component.html file now. Turns out that's the array that ng4 is looping through and pasting to the page. Finally, we've come full circle. So essentially, we've covered pretty much the whole loop, and we can even go back to the very beginning of the slide in order for me to hit this point home. If we go, let's look at the architecture page. Architecture page from Angular 2. Remember, this is the search component. This is search component.html and injecting a service, and this is our service over here, guys. So essentially, things are pretty dynamic. The moment that the TypeScript file is kind of created and instantiated onto the browser, it's already got this service injected into it, the search music function with the HTTP request. So that's already part of the component object. The component has all these properties. It's got some of it is strings, some of it is variables, some of it is methods. It's got all this cool stuff attached to it. The moment that the user types ACDC, it's going to go back in a circle, and this stuff keeps on listening to each other. They're in constant communication with one another. They're just in sync really well. ACDC goes back to the component. The component runs the method that's already a part of its search music, and it saves it in a variable called searchres. That searchres variable gets printed onto the screen via the template. Let's have a look at our actual search component.html and searchres. Bada bing, bada boom. So again, ts this.searchres equals res.artist.items. Everything that comes back from the HTTP request gets saved in there, and it gets saved in this variable search component.searchres. That's kind of replaced this whole concept of scope. We just save it as a property of a component, and bam, let res of searchres start looping through there. Print the artist name, print its genre, print a bunch of other stuff, and it's really good stuff. That pretty much covers. We've come full circle, my friends. And that pretty much ends that section. Let's see if we need anything else. Okay, fine. And in case you're interested, you can also go into this link over here, and that's where Trevor C. went in order to get all of his details about the Spotify API. If you want to keep on experimenting with this specific project, you can feel free to experiment with it. Thanks so much for tuning in to Angular Part 2 Crash Course, Angular 2 Crash Course Part 2. This chapter is all finished up, and in the next chapter, the next part, we're going to be going through 3 more really cool projects which have some tutorials, video tutorials, and written tutorials already attached to them. So be sure to check out part number 3 as well.